Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly shirim on the Ramchal's Adir BaMarom on the Ijarabba. And we're continuing as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is preparing the Chavraya, who we met last week, the 10 students of Rabbi Shimon, the Asara Chasadim of Chachma and Bina, the ability to draw the wisdom down into a revealed way, utilizing the hands to form it properly, to create a vessel in which that Gilui can take shape in the proper way that reveals the yichud of above and below, which is the secret of the etzba and the finger. So we're continuing to see the setup where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is setting the preliminary stage of the prerequisite awareness that must be held in mind during the Gilui of Torah. So Pasach v'Yamar, Rabbi Shimon opens up his mouth and he says, Arur ha'ish asher yasa pesel u'masecha mase yadei charash. That cursed is the individual who creates a graven image, or an image, or an imageable depiction of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, or the work of one's own hands. V'sham b'seiter va'anu kol ha'am va'amru amen. And they utilize it in a concealed way, and everybody answered amen. So Rabbi Shimon quotes the pasuk from Dvarim Chaf Zayin Tes Zayin. So Arur Ha'ish, this klala, Ar Ha'ish, this promise of a curse that's going to be applied to somebody. Over here, Rabbi Shimon is bringing it in the context of his scholars of Pnimiyas HaTorah. And when it comes to understanding Pnimiyas HaTorah, so a person has to always ensure that they're not coming to make a graven image out of what they're understanding. The typical way that the words of the Zohar HaKadosh are understood is that there's an azhara, there's a concern when it comes to learning Pnimiyas HaTorah, when it comes to understanding the Seder HaShtalshalos, which is, so to speak, the shape in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals his infinite light into a finite shape, so to speak, that can maintain the infinite light and allow for a process of drawing the light down from above and allowing a below to ascend upwards to create a renewal of light. That entire system, all of the partzufim, all of the olamos, all of the spheros, those must be understood in the delicate nature in which they take shape, meaning to say the mamish kavyachol of it all, the metaphoric literality of it all, the fact that they're real, but they're unreal to any graspable sense. They're real in the fact that they're the hasaga that the Arizal brought down and that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brought down, but they're not real in the sense that they don't operate as parts of God, God forbid, because there's no parts to God. There's no parts to the indivisible unity of God. So on the one hand, we have to be able to say that these things are real. On the other hand, we have to be able to say that they're not real. So when a person makes them too real and they're magshim them, God forbid, they create a separation, they create a partition, they create a notion that the ideas are thick, or that they're real, or that they're graspable. But at the same point, we have to enable our minds to come upon a Seder Ishtalshlis so that we can have some sort of relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this Azhara that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is expressing over here is Aru Ha'isha Shayasa Pesel, that the danger is that a person will come to make an idol out of the notions and make them more real than they actually are meant to be, or less real than they're meant to be taken, and that's going to create the issue. A person has to be careful of it, and everybody said Amen. What I said until now is typically the reading of the words in the Idraba. What the Ramchal points out is going to be something different, that the Arur Ha'ish, the curse of the individual here, is not so much a misunderstanding of the shape in which the Seder Ishtalshalos takes place, but it's far more a misutilization or a misapplication of the ideas themselves, where a person is no longer connecting the expression that they're sharing to the root from which they're taking it. That when it comes to Kabbalah, when it comes to teaching Pnimiyas Torah, there's a klal gadol that it's mipeh el peh me'ish le'ish, that there is a process in which the wisdom is conveyed, and thankfully for us, we have that congealed process within the books themselves. But even in that case, a person has to always have living teachers that they look up to, because there's a process in the Seder Hashtalshalis of Mesoras Torah, especially when it comes to Pnimiyas Torah, primarily because the fundamental core of what Pnimiyas Torah is coming to teach is the unbroken chain that exists between above and below, and the fact that something can reveal itself on a higher level and then operate on a lower level. And in truth, there's not such a distinction between the two of them, because all they are further garbings of the previous level. So there's a connection between above and below. There's a yichud between the Father and the Son. There's a relationality between higher levels and lower levels, which means that it's an act of receptivity. Kabbalah means to receive something. It means to be mevata one's das, to be aware that what they can draw down are the words that have been taught, or that the words that they understand from the Hasfarim HaKadoshim, which is also considered a way of being taught, that a person who reads the books of the tzaddikim, we know that they're considered as if they're Talmidim of those tzaddikim, as the Rebbe points out, as Rabbi Nachman points out, that the tzaddikim hide themselves in their books, but there's a fundamental need to draw it down by way of tradition, to draw it down by way of each generation and each teacher to student. And it seems, as far as I'm understanding, the Ramchal's understanding of this Azhar of Rabbi Shimon, that's more of the focus that he's going to be looking at. And it's going to be a protection against the bastardization of the wisdom. The bastardization of the wisdom is when you separate the offspring from the source from which it comes, when there's the appearance of an offspring that's devoid of a source in which it is fundamentally connected. And that sense of the mamzer, the fact that something can be bastardized from its original purpose and its original meaning, that it could have been expressed in one way, and then it can be drawn down and disconnected, Rahman al-Islan, and cut off and cut away from its original source, and it can become a bastardized expression of itself. V'zeh sod gadol, says Rabbi Shimon, and says the Ramchal. It's a big secret of what Rabbi Shimon is coming to warn against over here. V'hu medaber al ha'omer devarim she'enu yodea b'chachma hazos. And it's speaking about an individual who says things that they don't know within this wisdom. Says things that they don't know, in terms of where they drew it down from, or where they're drawing it from, or the higher level that it comes from. Shehu ra gadol, because that's a profoundly destructive thing. V'hu mamish hapesel v'hamasecha. And it's actually the separation and the idolatrous impulse inherent within any of this wisdom, which is that the individual will come and say things that they have not received from somebody else. The sodo mamzer. And the secret of this is a bastardization of something. Now, the Ramchal was fighting very real and authentically against Katshatz and Oso Ha'ish in his farm, Kinas Hashem Tzvakos. And so there's a real way of understanding through the context of the Ramchal that the misappropriation of Pnimiyas Torah is ultimately the bastardization of Pnimiyas Torah, which is taking an original source and teaching it in the wrong way. That's the important thing here. The Ramchal is hinting to the fact that the bastardization of the text is the problem. The text is never the problem. The ideas are not the problem. If you know the ideas, if you're receiving the ideas, if you properly understand the ideas as they are written, and you're not trying to manipulate them to be something that they're not, so then the text is a fail-proof thing. The text is a safe, holy thing. It's only when one enters into the process of bastardizing the text, of trying to take the idea away from its original context and away from its original source, that's where the real destruction takes place. That's literally the pesel and the masecha. That's literally the secret of the mamzer. Kinotlim or haTorah, because they take the light of the Torah. V'tachas shahayat tzarech la'asos b'sod asiyas hayadayim ha'ela shel ha'kedusha oisem ma'aseh ra b'koyach yidei hasamech mem. That instead of taking the words of Torah, drawing down the Shefa from above, which is the secret of Aleph K, Vav K, the unity of above and below, and allowing it to be formed through the hands of the individual themselves, which is extending beyond the self and receiving from higher and descending down lower, which is the Koach of the Adayim, which is the secret of the Adayim, which is the Adayim Su'idechem Kodesh Ubarchu Es Hashem. Over here we have Maisi de Charish, which is literally utilizing the hands in the wrong way. It's forming something, but by stealing it, bastardizing it, by taking it away from its original context and forming it through hands of the Sitra Achra. V'tavin heitiv eich hasheker hamitchape al hadavar shel Torah u'bechinas hamaisa hamisader oso u'mitzayro b'tzura hahi. And again, says the Ramchal, we have to understand very well that the falsehood and the lies that cover over and seduce other people when it comes to words of Torah, it has everything to do with the way in which the Torah is being arranged and the way in which the Torah is being formed through the mouth and the intentions of the one who is giving over the Torah. But it has everything to do with the shape in which the Torah is being given over, but not the Torah itself. The Torah is always good. The Torah doesn't have dangerous ideas in it. When the Zohar HaKadosh talks about frightening ideas that were bastardized and misused, as the Ramchal points out in Kinas Hashem Tzvakos with Shabtai Tzvi and Kasa Arura and Yeshua Noitzri, v'chule, all of these ideas are manipulative and a bastardization of the original notions of the text, but it's not an issue inherent within the text itself. And that was the confidence, the mata'ois that the Ramchal had to descend down into those very places and show what the pshat of these texts are, which is Pnimiyas Torah itself. And so the issue, says the Ramchal, is never the idea itself. The ideas are not dangerous. It's the way that becomes the masech. It's the way in which the ideas are taught. It's the way in which a person brings themselves into it, which they have not received from their teachers. It's the way that a person can manipulate. That's the dangerous thing. Ki hadavar atzmo tov, the Torah itself is a wonderful thing. Ach ma'aseh ra, but a person's actions can be destructive. Ki umasi yedei samech mem, because it's the destructive hands of the other side which come to bastardize the wisdom of Pnimius Torah and misuse it. V'sham b'sisro shel olam, and it takes place. All of these unifications take place b'sisro shel olam, that Hakadosh Baruch Hu is involved in this, and there's subtle shifts. And Rabbi Shimon says this in order to ensure that all the Chavraya Kadisha are protected from any mistake. That the responsibility was to give over Torah that they knew, not Torah that they didn't know. Not Torah that they didn't know. Giving over Torah that one doesn't know is a bastardization of the text, because then a person is giving themselves over and not the Torah itself. What a person can teach is what they know, what the books say. And when a person understands that warning, so that's the warning of Rabbi Shimon, that they shouldn't make a mistake in the rectifications, which is saying what they know. Each and every person had to draw down that which they knew. Milin dikshoit, true words, ka'amor lamala, like we said before. Milin dikshoit, the exact measure of Pnimius Torah that has to descend by way of each and every individual, not more and not less. And here the Ramchal is summarizing Rav Chaim Vital's Hakdama to Eitz Chaim Kadisha with the prerequisites of what it means to be a person who tries to enter into the Pardes. And again, there's a distinction between talking about the words and knowing what the text says and actually being a person who considers themselves as someone who's worthy of doing the work. That's a very different thing. But when a person sees themselves as worthy of doing the work, so then there's prerequisites towards doing that work. And these are prerequisites that each and every person who has any shaykhs to Pnimius Torah has to try and hold themselves to. And a person has to understand, someone who wants their actions in this world, the rectifications, the Torah that they share, their encounter with others, their activities in this world to have an impact properly above, so to awaken what it must awaken. A person has to be an orderly mensch. A person has to have organization to themselves. A person has to have an organizing principle to the core of what they do. What does my day look like? How do I function? Just as it is above, there's a very strict order in the way in which things operate above. So too, it must be reflected below, a strict order in which a person functions, not the self-same shape, so that we can renew the light each and every day. And the secret of this is turn away from evil and do good. Because a person who has not yet extricated themselves or untethered themselves from their desire to remain attached in the negativity. So Nikrai Maisav B'derech Arai. So then their engagement in Avodas Hashem is referred to as something that is impermanent, something that is not going to last forever, something that gets sparked but then it dissipates, gets sparked but then it dissipates. But someone who aligns themselves in orientation to the way that things are operating above, so to speak, as be'emes hashchina kove'es dira alav. In that place, a person lives with Shechina. In that place, a person lives with Shechina Mesudar in their life, where each and everything that they do, everything that they eat, every step that they take, every minyan that they daven at, every orderly fraction of their day becomes a place in which the Shechina is going to dwell. First and foremost, yes, the path to the Eitz HaChaim is available to all, but the first thing that we have to do is place upon our paths the recognition that we have to fight against the other side. We have to refrain from immediate gratification and break free from the sense of the impossibility of overcoming our base desires, and to overcome the kitrug, and to overcome the hopelessness, and to overcome the bilbo. We have to all overcome that element. That's the sur meirah. And this is the secret of Kabbalah's own mitzvos, of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the recognition that the Torah describes to me how I can best connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, and that's the shorish of the ultimate good, and that's the shorish of the Tainuk HaAmiti, as the Ramchal explains in the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, and it leads to Ruach HaKodesh. That's the path. And specifically what I don't do, it's about setting limits for oneself, about maintaining boundaries within one's life. And in that way, a person becomes a guardian along the path of holiness, that they're not deviating from one side to the other. They're not saying what they don't know, but they're also not saying what they do know. And they're ensuring that they have the bounded nature in which they're going to be able to forge forward along the path of Kedusha. Ubekoyach Amen. And what the Chavraya answer is, Va'amru Amen, and the Amen is the Ikr. The Amen is the Ne'emanus and the Emuna, and the Koyach of Imun, and the Koyach of the Oman that rests within the Amnus of the individual. It's a secret of Derech Emuna B'charti. What is it that validates one's sense of self? What is it that gives a person the ability to take the next step forward? Ultimately, it's their ability to say Amen, and that the Gadol, the Oina Amen Yoter from the Mevarich themselves, that to say Amen is to uphold the blessing and to ensure that it has standing, as the tzaddikim say. So by saying Amen and mitchazkim la'amud kenegdo, we strengthen ourselves and we gain the strength necessary of standing in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu and standing tall. Ki Amen, because the name of Amen is the secret of Yud, Aleph, Hey, Daled, Vav, Nun, Hey, Yud, which is the unity of Havaya and Adnus, which is the secret of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's Teferes, Kutchabrichu, and Shrinte and Malchus being unified together. And through that koyach, a person has the ability of being Mechaber Shemaim and Aretz and ensuring the Sur Meran, the Asay Tov, to the best of our abilities, to the degree that we're capable, with the requisite amount of bittul, and recognizing that we know what we don't know. And when a person knows that they don't know, so then there's nothing that they don't know, and then they can teach what they know because they know that they don't know. And Memela, what we have is the segula of the osios of the Torah and the entrance into the gateways of the tzaddikim. V'cheinu kabbalah sadavar al atzma b'koyach u'b'kiyum. And so too, it enables a person, when I say Amen, it gives me the strength to accept something upon myself, to make a decision, and to allow that decision to have strength and to have a lasting effect in my life. And only afterwards, once a person has stabilized themselves, once a person has developed the prerequisite framing of where they're going to draw the spiritual lights into, what does my spiritual day look like? What does my avodas Hashem look like? What does my davening look like? When am I learning? When am I doing my mitzvos? When am I preparing for my mitzvos? When am I learning this seder? When am I learning that seder? To whatever degree a person's life operates, they have to find that organizing principle that enables them to create vessels to receive light. And then the light will come. And then the Tov is going to come. And only afterwards does Rabbi Shimon continue, and he says, Eis lasos Lashem, Ama Eis lasos Lashem, Mefrum the Haferus Arasecha. So only once we prepare ourselves to be vessels that are worthy of receiving light, and to prepare oneself as a vessel means to create stability in one's life, not to allow each and every spiritual day to be a day of arai, to be a day of surprise, to be a day of not knowing, to be a day of lack of stability, but rather to have a kvius, to have a kovea makom le tfilaso, kovea makom le Torah, so that a person should have a stabilization in their spiritual life, so that they can have kalim that can create a place, a receptacle for the light that's going to emerge. Be'ezras Hashem.